This narrative, these terrorist organizations have been so exposed to the average person. Al Jazeera never publishes any of these videos. They have been extremely disconnected from the pulse of what's happening on the ground, and they're being exposed for being the voice of Hamas, the voice of those radical terrorist groups.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Western Spirit Podcast. Today with us, we have Hayvi Bouzo, and I hope I said your name right, Hayvi.
You said it correct.
So Hayvi is the co-founder and executive director of Yalla Productions. She's also the co-founder and co-editor of ME24 and host of the Yalla Show. Hayvi's a journalist, a media personality, and someone who we'll get into exactly a little bit about your history and how you got to where you are, because at such a young age, you have so much influence and so much knowledge about what's happening where I'm sitting here in the Middle East from where you are in the U.S. So it's such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ariel. I'm so glad we're finally able to work out the time and for me to join you. And
Of course.
so glad, yes.
Don't
That,
tell the people what was going on behind the scenes. That's not
no.
for them. Um, so, Hayvi, let's talk about our region. I'm in Israel right now. We're about 2 weeks in from the ceasefire. As we speak, the Vice President of the United States is coming right next to where I am. So tomorrow, all of my highway next to us will be closed. And he's coming because of the ceasefire. And there was like a day where the two soldiers were killed tragically by Hamas terrorists, and then Israel responded. But it looks that we're back to where the fighting, at least as of now, is stopped. How does, I guess the best question to ask first off is, how does the Arab speaking world look at what happened? Do they see Hamas as the victor, that it held on and it's still alive and breathing, even barely, but still there? Does it look at Israel generally as the bad force uniformly? Because that's the way we feel. But is that true?
Actually, that's a very good question, Ariel. It's not. Even though um, channels like Al Jazeera continue to try to hammer this narrative, but I'm going to tell you right now, in the Arabic speaking countries, this narrative has become weaker and weaker and weaker, to the point right now where I believe we're in a completely new time. It's like we're in a new time in history where this narrative is no longer having the receiving ears that it used to have, not even 5 years ago. So it's been, of course, a progression of a shift in public opinion in Arab countries following the so-called Arab Spring, which was hijacked by Islamists later on. It started by a lot of people who actually were talking about their grievances, but it was hijacked and then it was infiltrated by Islamists. And of course, we know what the Islamic Republic of Iran did. They empowered their militias to slaughter people, and their backed militias include a terrorist organization like Hamas, like the Islamic Jihad. And basically people realized the truth about these groups starting then. So we're talking about more than a decade ago. The shift started happening. Now we have a completely new reality where this narrative, these terrorist organizations have been so exposed to the average person that you see a rising number of voices from different countries across the region, not only talking about who they are, but basically saying that no, actually, we want peace with Israel. These are just evil groups that have been slaughtering people. And this is a shift that not even Al Jazeera, with all of the money that they have, that they're trying to kind of continue hammering down their narrative, are able to change. We're in the turning point in the public opinion in the Middle East, I believe.
But Heavy, can you just maybe, I just want to maybe be a little bit tough and push
Yes,
back.
please.
But Al Jazeera is still the most watched TV station in the Arab speaking world, I think, by far. And also the other stations aren't that much better. The main ones, I guess what we would call the mainstream media of the Arab world. And they all are pushing a narrative that says the opposite of what you said, pretty much. And on the other hand, it seems that also the regimes are, let's say, just put it that way, the people on the ground seem to be, maybe it's a totally weird picture that I'm getting. But we see in polls the Egyptian public really does not like the Jewish people, not just Israel. It's pretty scary. We see in Jordan polls showing that, and in other places. Maybe in the Gulf states it's a little bit different, but in general, the Arab speaking world seems to still be where it was always. Or what am I missing?
So yeah, you made a very good point. And even when I give talks about this subject, when I talk about the changes happening, I actually do not mention Egypt. Egypt is not the example that I'm talking about. Very unfortunate, but that's the reality. The public opinion in Egypt is actually on the reverse because of a combination of the Azhar and the media in Egypt. So we have a very negative duel that has been radicalizing people in Egypt now for a very long time, and it's very dangerous. So, yes, I agree with you. Egypt is not one of those examples, but definitely the Levant. So, I talk about Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, people in countries like Yemen under the Houthis, all the people who suffered directly under the occupation of these radical extremist terrorist groups have literally shifted completely to the other direction. You mentioned the Gulf countries. 100% agree. In the Gulf countries, it's like they see that with Israel, they have all of these, alliance, benefits, progress, stability, prosperity. So, in the countries who didn't and who have been infiltrated by the Iranian-backed militias, they look at these Abraham Accord countries that, of course, include countries like Morocco, that they're jealous, they want that. So there is this major shift. But you also mentioned Jordan has a majority Palestinian population. They have been completely infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood, and you have people that even sympathetic to the Islamic Republic of Iran, despite everything that has happened in a country like Syria, even though Jordan as a country has been suffering from them, because with the Assad regime, when the Assad regime was in power, they were smuggling all these drugs to Jordan. They were trying to destabilize Jordan. They were trying to empower these radical elements within Jordan to overthrow the kingdom. So the Jordan has suffered from them, but they do have this issue that is, happening in terms of the public opinion that I think needs to be addressed as well. But if you look at the vast majority of other countries within the region, you cannot not see this shift. And I post on social media in Arabic. I follow what's the conversations, what's going on in the Arabic speaking social media. And I can tell you right now, Ariel, this shift is really historic. And we need to, kind of look at it for what it is. I'm not extremely optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. And I'm telling you right now, I do see this shift. And I don't think there's going to be a way back for these terrorist groups to kind of win back, let's say, the so-called argument, even with the help of Al Jazeera. Can I address something you mentioned really important, which is the kind of the difference between Al Jazeera and other Arabic-speaking media? So there is a difference. It's not that they're exact same. There's Sky News Arabia and Al Arabiya are not Al Jazeera. They're not. Al Jazeera is literally right now completely hammering down the same Hamas narrative as if nothing has happened. They are disconnected from time, they're disconnected from reality. They did not even showcase. You know what Hamas did? The first thing Hamas terrorists did when they came out from the tunnels, when the ceasefire started, is that they immediately started executing Palestinians with a bullet in the back of the head. And they filmed themselves doing it. And they tortured Palestinians to death. And they filmed themselves doing it. And they continue to publish these videos. Al Jazeera never publishes any of these videos. They have been extremely disconnected from the pulse of what's happening on the ground, and they're being exposed for being the voice of Hamas, the voice of those radical terrorist groups. And I think that you're right, they are still more watched. But when the Abraham Accords were signed, Al Jazeera witnessed a dip in its viewership that was unprecedented, because people were realizing, okay, look, there's this channel that has been promoting all these evil terrorist groups that have been ravaging the region, destroying lives, destroying countries, killing people. And then you have this path now for peace, that it's about prosperity, it's about stability, it's about people to people living finally together working together. So people started watching Al Jazeera a lot less. Of course, they gained their popularity, so-called popularity, again when Hamas committed October 7th. So this is what they live off of: terrorism, off of fear, hate, war, and they start dying out when things shift in the opposite direction, which is, I think, where we're at today. So yes, they are more watched, they have a lot bigger budgets, but they're actually witnessing their own decline, even in numbers and viewerships.
If you had to put, before I ask you about specific countries, which some of them came from originally, and your family and everything, but before that, what would you say is generally, if we put Egypt aside and maybe some other radical, more extreme countries, is the general, you think, roughly speaking, how much of the new generation, younger people in the Arab speaking world, are open? I'm not even going to say like Israel because that's not the right word. Are open to
Mhm.
cooperation with Israel at some point. Are looking at Hamas and saying we don't agree with what they did, even if we have
Mhm.
some, problem with what Israel did. We don't agree with the way Hamas is act. Like, how much is the, roughly speaking, 50-50, 70-30? How do
Mhm.
you look at it?
So let me tell you something that I know people in Israel probably are not going to really understand, because of the fact that Israel is the democracy. There's free flow of information. There's a free debate. People could argue and have dinner at the same time and still hug each other afterwards. So this is not the reality in Arab speaking countries, because it's like you grow up knowing that if you share your opinion out in the open, you might literally lose your life. So even to me, when you say like the polls, right? Like there were polls here and there. I really don't know how you can conduct polls when people are afraid to say their opinion, when people think that they might be killed right after they finish this because they could be monitored by the regime here or there, and their life will be gone, and that's it for them, right? And also the what will happen from the society, attacking them, saying, oh, how dare you speak out? Like, you can think it, but don't say it out loud, right? So in private conversations, when people reach out to me directly, the shift is really enormous. I want to tell you one example of something that we did. Yalla and Builders of the Middle East, we collaborate on a lot of content. There are partners of us, and they're like Yalla. We talk to the general public. We're not trying to throw another propaganda in there. We're trying just to share truths and tell stories that have been untold, unfortunately, in Arabic speaking media or Western speaking media or on social media, and highlight these inspirational positive stories that need to be told from the region, from all over the region. So one of the stories we did is that we actually sent camera people into different parts of Syria. And we asked one question: do you want peace with Israel? And a lot of people refused to speak on camera. But the people who said yes, they would speak on camera, all of them said that they want peace with Israel. This has never happened before. To me, as somebody who grew up there, I know how big of a taboo this is. This is to be even said. The first thing you would be accused of, if you would say, "Oh my God, like Hamas murdering people in committing a suicide bombing in a bus, killing Israeli citizens because they're Israeli, because they're Jewish, people who are civilians, innocent. It's basically a terrorist act." I grew up thinking that and talking about that with my family, my parents, who were very liberal, thankfully. But they were like, oh, yeah, but like if we say that outside of our home, immediately we'll be like, you are a spy, you are a traitor, you should be killed. Can you imagine? And now you're seeing people on camera in Syria saying, we want peace with Israel. This is historic. So these are the shifts that are, definitely worth noting.
But if you like, not poll, I'm not talking about polls. I'm talking about just your estimation. Like, do you think it's really a significant amount of people that have changed their minds and in a sort of evolutionary way, and just saying we had enough of all this war. We want cooperation for even like not idealistic reasons, just for money, economics,
Yeah.
quiet, not killing each other, peaceful
Yes, and
coexistence.
And because they saw like what's the people who were claiming to fight Israel, what are they actually fighting, right? What Hamas is actually doing to the Palestinians. What Israel provides as an example by the way like politically it is in terms of like the political structure of the country, the rights that people enjoy in Israel, the so it's all these information that people didn't have, didn't reach before, and now they have access to. And in addition to what they saw on the other side. So I want to give you, I my estimation, Ariel, is that there is a major shift. And I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna give you numbers because I don't want to say a number that I'm not going to be able to back up, but I'm going to give you more examples. So, and specifically in countries like Syria and Lebanon, I don't know if you've seen what happened recently in Lebanon, but there was a guy who was a very influential Lebanese political figure. His name is Marwan Ahmadi, there was an assassination attempt against him by Hezbollah and the Assad regime at one point. He was, of course, like completely silent, and it was just like they assassinated a lot of Lebanese political figures, thinkers, and that's it. They were like just their life was taken away from them, including Shia who were criticizing Hezbollah and saying we do not want the Iranian occupation in Lebanon. So, what did Marwan Ahmadi do a few days ago? He appeared on I-24. And this is historic. I'm going to tell you why. So in Lebanon, they have created, of course, Hezbollah created a military tribunal to anybody who would criticize Hezbollah, and if they do any sort of connection or communication with Israelis. There is a woman who was arrested in Lebanon and imprisoned and sentenced because she spoke to an Israeli journalist. So for Marwan Ahmadi to come out on an Israeli channel in an interview, this is absolutely historic. This shows you that people are not even willing to be afraid of Hezbollah. Marcel Ghanem, another Lebanese figure who is a very well-known TV host and journalist, has one of the most popular TV shows in Lebanon. He came out on his TV show and said, they're trying to make it a crime for me to say I want peace with Israel. I want peace with Israel. He said that on his own TV show. So these are the things that are happening, and people are literally breaking this taboo that was set up on them by the so-called axis of resistance, the axis of terrorism that is led by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yes, and I want to now talk about Syria, which, if I remember correctly, is where your family is from originally, right?
Yeah,
And
born raised there. Mhm.
we are in the middle of a civil war, and it's like we are supposedly after, but we're not really after. And at least it seems to me that way. Israel is was not too long ago bombing Shara's people because they were going into the areas with the Druze and this whole situation. But if you had to, I guess, maybe explain to us the situation in Syria right now from someone who grew up there, and also where you think things are going, because I never understood, by the way, why Syria is one Syria. There seems to be the safer option would be to make three Syrias. One would be the Sunnis, and the other one would be maybe the Druze and maybe the Christians, and another one would be maybe, I'm not sure, the Kurds or something. But it always didn't make sense to me that all these sectarian factions that hate each other are in the
Mhm.
same small place of land. Maybe I'm wrong, but how do you see the situation?
Look, the Assad regime definitely played this card of dividing people based on their sectarian religious affiliations. I mean, let me tell you about what happened to the Jewish community in Syria. I know from my own mother, who grew up in the Jewish quarter in Aleppo, what happened to her own friends and neighbors. Though she comes from Muslim parents, she did grow up and witnessed, she saw firsthand what happened to her own friends and neighbors, the violations, the crimes, the absolute horrendous things that were committed against the Jewish community, until families were running away in the middle of the night. So this is what happened. And in the same time, the Kurds were completely suppressed. They could not name their children Kurdish names, specifically in northern eastern Syria. They could not speak Kurdish. They would be literally executed for speaking Kurdish. They were trying to Arabize the Kurds. That's, I think, why my father gave us Kurdish names, because it was a form of feeling the pain of the people who are Kurds, who were basically suffering this oppression. We know that the number of Christians has dropped. We know that there were atrocities that were committed by the minority Alawites against the majority Sunnis, and that the Shiite radical elements backed by Iran, like Hezbollah, the IRGC backed militias, went into Syria and slaughtered people because they were Sunni. They slaughtered entire towns and villages. They completely emptied out entire towns and villages, and the world didn't do anything or say anything about it. And it happened for years after years. Okay. So these are the realities. And then now you have Ahmed al-Shara's government, who basically is a former jihadi, or not former. We're trying to see it. I want to believe that we can find way forward to see if we can get into a new social and political contract in Syria that protects people. But the way they acted towards minorities was not reassuring. They, committed atrocities against the Alawites. Yes, people expected that because of the atrocities that were committed by Alawites against other sectarian groups, but it's still not acceptable. It's still not okay. Holding people accountable, having actual public trials that are, by the rule of law is what you would expect, but not going into villages and killing people. This same thing happened to the Druze who were protesting against Assad very courageously and nonstop. And they allowed for either their own elements to go in there and commit atrocities, or turned a blind eye and allowed some Bedouins to come from other parts of Syria into. So I don't know if you guys know, if you know Ariel, but for our listeners and viewers to know that there were tensions between the Druze and the Bedouins. This is something historic in this part of Syria, okay? And that tension happened again. The Ahmed al-Shara's government had the opportunity to be a reconciliating force, but instead, what they did is that they allowed more Bedouins to come, and literally, that a lot of them were actually Islamists, and to commit atrocities against the Druze because they're Druze. So, so this is the reality that we've had. Now, the U.S. engagement in Syria, I think it's a very positive step. I think that we need to make sure that things do move in the right direction. Do we still need a lot of proofs from Ahmed al-Shara? Yes, absolutely. We need to see that there are control over these elements within Syria. We want to make sure that the Islamic Republic of Iran's elements are no longer in Syria. We know that some of them were there. I'm not sure if you saw, but there were some protests, so-called protests, that came out in Syria where people were basically chanting for Gaza, but what they were chanting for, they were chanting for the Houthis. They were chanting. So it was like, okay, so this is the Islamic Republic of Iran's proxy elements there. Those are what what they're talking about here. And people were really angry. People were angry on social media. They started circling around these so-called protests to let the government in Damascus know these are elements. They're saying people are suspicious now of anybody who tries to claim to be pro-Palestinian, because what's happening is that you're attaching all these things to it. It becomes a pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, pro the Houthis. And that is something that people in Syria, I don't think they trust or feel comfortable with anymore, that to the point that they were angry and asking the Syrian government to hold these people accountable, to actually arrest them, to interrogate them, to know why they're doing this, because there's no popularity on the ground for these people. Yeah, so I think there's a change, but we have to verify a lot about what's really happening in terms of, the Druze protection and the other groups' protection in Syria.
When you said that the U.S., the way that you think the U.S. is positively acting here, is that
Mhm.
they're making Ashara be reliant on America, and therefore we, the West, or we, the U.S., can keep an eye out. So he needs America, and therefore he won't be able to maybe act on his bad instincts because he knows that at that point the US will intervene. So he knows that he's in within a framework that he has to work in. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. More involvement, more leverage, more stability. Now, look, the thing is that the U.S. is really not interested in going into conflicts. They want to stabilize the situation, but how to stabilize the situation? I think we need to create a new reality where the concerns of all these groups in Syria are addressed for real, that Israel's also role and the idea, like, let me just be clear about the situation with the Druze. The Druze in southern Syria have their own family members in Israel. They have their own relatives in Israel. The Druze community in Israel is a very well integrated community. And now they're seeing what's happening to their own relatives literally a few miles away from them, literally, like very close. So this is a reality, and the protection of these different groups is essential. Nobody should be hurt based on their religious, ethnic, cultural, any type of association, worship. People should be able to live and worship freely and be who they are. And I believe, we have to have a role where we can create a new reality with and kind of enforcing that these groups are not going to be violated in the way that we just saw. And you know what? I really think that people in Syria suffered a lot. I would like to see that, like, there is a stable future for Syria, but it cannot happen if these radical elements, if these jihadists are not put into check, and if we don't have a new social and cultural and political contract that is created. And I'm going to be honest with you, Ariel, I'm one of those people, like, if that could be pushed forward and addressed while maintaining the protection of all these different groups, I would really love to see a security agreement between Syria and Israel. I would like to see, a future where we can actually build a peace, a people to people peace. I really believe this would be good. But I'm not going to tell you right now that, oh my God, I'm so optimistic and I'm like, I think it's going to happen tomorrow. I think that we really have to verify before we can even think about trusting at this point. But I think engagement is better than non engagement.
Can I ask you a small and just a small thing about how do you see Turkey in this situation? Because it seems that the Shara is very reliant on Turkey, and Turkey is using Syria as like a sort of playground, even. But the American administration is very pro-Turkey, at least Trump, the way he speaks about Erdogan. So
Mhm.
should we in Israel be worried about Turkey, or is it maybe it's an overblown? Because we always speak about Turkey and Israel like they're such a big boogeyman, but then there's the Turkish economy is really bad. It seems like there's tons of corruption there. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem to me. I don't know. How do you look at it?
I see Turkey as a reality in the northern part of Syria, and I see that there was a bad history between Syria and Turkey, and that there is a mistrust, actually, if you think about it on a public level, with Turkey because of the history. Now, Erdogan definitely used the Islamic element to, try to have more and exert more influence over Syria. And I think that it actually did not work in many ways, because people started realizing in Syria that Erdogan was trying to use the people in Syria. He used a lot of them to have his own internal fighting against people in Turkey and gain, like, their votes. And it was really bad, actually. And then there were people that, had a lot of their rights violated in Turkey because of this. So there's a lot of internal tension in Turkey. And there's also all the minority groups in Syria that don't really trust Turkey because of Turkey's history with minorities. Not even, let's not go to the Kurds, because that's a whole other story there, right? With the continuation of attempts by Turkey to attack the SDF areas and all of that. Now, I think what the Trump administration, though, is really trying to do here is that we do have the reality, right, of Turkey being there, that Ahmed al-Sharaa was on the border of Turkey, and they became the most powerful force because Turkey and Qatar made sure that the Islamists were the ones that are most powerful. But this is the reality. I think the U.S. is trying to create some sort of a new, like, I think, agreement, cooperation, where all parties know where things start or end. I think Israel, of course, should be concerned about Turkey trying to, go into the south. I mean, like, or go into any area that is Israel considers to be not safe, because we know that Turkey has the history of supporting Hamas, of supporting radical elements. So there are things that we have to address here. Um, but I'm basically from the school of thought that Turkey is a reality here, but for example, Russia is not. And I think we need to make sure that Russia does not come back to Syria. And that's another thing that I'm kind of like now seeing what happened between a Shara meeting with Putin. What happened there? What were the promises that were made? My understanding from people who basically, advocate for Syria and the Ahmed al-Shara's government to have a good relationship with Washington. One person said that the whole visit was because they wanted Russia not to veto the sanctions lift on Syria. But that's, I think, is something for us to be concerned about, and to address to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, I promise you I'm going back to the media, but I have one more country that you spoke about is Lebanon. So one of the
Yes.
things that's fascinating about Lebanon is that I remember I was here on October 7th, and right away on October 8th, we started getting rockets from the north, from
Mhm.
Hezbollah, and half the entire northern part of Israel was evacuated pretty much. We were and then now Hezbollah is like destroyed in such a bad way that finally the Lebanese government is willing to say out loud that it should be stripped of its weapons and disbanded as a military militia. And not only that, it's actively using the Lebanese army to help find Hezbollah weapons and destroy it. And
Mhm.
like you said, people are not scared to even talk to Israeli media, some people, but it's such a devastating and weird turn of events that I will just ask, how do you analyze it, but also how do people look at it in the media? On October 8th, everyone thought of Hezbollah as like the strongest, like they're invincible. They have so much. I remember, by the way, lastly, one interesting thing is that I asked the top military person here in Israel, what would happen full scale war with Hezbollah, and he said 20,000 people will die. We
Oh,
didn't even get to like 200 people that died from that. And not that I'm saying every life lost is a big
yes, of
deal, but the
course.
expectation was way worse. So how do you
Yes.
see it?
Wow. Thank you for this very important question and analysis, Ariel, because that's absolutely true. It is. I'm gonna tell you, like, Hezbollah was like had this big, kind of like, um, I don't know, enigma around them that they
Aura.
created. All right, yeah, it's like it's all like it was like a bubble. It was a bubble that Israel bursted, like, And I'm gonna tell you something very personal to me, but like when Israel took out Hassan Nasrallah, that Hezbollah committed so many atrocities. I think the West and a lot of people who are not very familiar with the complexity of the Middle East and what's really happening in the Middle East have no idea how many atrocities were committed by Hezbollah, how many good people were just killed, by Hassan Nasrallah. The fact that Hezbollah is not only a terrorist organization, they are a drug cartel. They ruined so many countless lives and spread bad evil all around them. So the idea of taking out Hassan Nasrallah is something that a lot of people just thought literally, Ariel, like an impossibility. My father was still alive during that time. And it makes me choked up right now to say that. But he witnessed that, amazing moment in history. when this happened. And I think a lot of people don't realize how, how much like justice this moment brought to people across the Middle East, and he passed away, my father, since, but the fact that he witnessed this, it was just such a beautiful, um like, kind of victorious moment. And I want to like tell our audience, people who are watching and listening, like, this is how people felt across the region. People were celebrating in literally, like, in a city like Idlib, people were celebrating this moment. People were having signs in Hebrew and in Arabic. Can you imagine, Ariel? Signs in Hebrew thanking Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Idlib, the area where the Islamists were controlling. People didn't care. They were just celebrating all over. People were celebrating in Lebanon. People were celebrating in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. Like, it was just, you can say, like, the Middle East literally, like, kind of united at that point, in that one moment in history. And I think that, that's like that fear that people had of Hezbollah just started declining. And right now they are at a much much weaker point. Now we don't know if they're completely, like, we know that they're probably trying to regroup. They're probably trying to do whatever they can do, because all what they want to do is to continue occupying Lebanon, to continue threatening the people in Lebanon, threatening Israel, and continue being a proxy of the Iranian regime. But um, they are in a place right now where they've never been. Like you said, we've never heard the Lebanese government speak about disarming Hezbollah. We've never heard the Lebanese military say that they're going to actually go and attempt to disarm Hezbollah. This is all historic, and it's all because Israel, since October 8th, when Hezbollah started attacking Israel in collaboration with Hamas and the Islamic regime in Iran, that this was basically the shift that changed the Middle East. And people know that. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody talks about it. Like,
And
it's
did
all because
the
of
Heavy
Israel.
did when people on social media and people that you interact with and that you interview on your network, do they is once Hezbollah became so weak, that bubble burst of people
Yes,
being worried about them, is the hatred towards Hezbollah much more in the air? Are Lebanese people that aren't Shiites, or even Shiites that might not be aligned with Hezbollah,
yes.
are they much more vocal in their like visceral hate for them than they were before Nasrallah, for example, was killed, or before the beeper attack happened?
Yes, of course. I mean, I just mentioned those two examples that were just unprecedented, to have a Lebanese politician appear on an Israeli channel, or a Lebanese TV host say, I want peace with Israel on television, knowing what Hezbollah used to do to people who would do that or say that. So there is a massive change, and a lot of more people are speaking out every day on Lebanese television, saying it out loud. The occupation to us is the Iranian backed Hezbollah, and we want peace with Israel. So we are in a very historic moment, and I really believe that we crossed already. Like, there's a tipping point that we already are after, and what's before is never gonna come back, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Okay, now I want to get back to like the media and the West, the way they look at the Arab world.
Yeah,
It seems to me that if you watch only Western media in America or in Europe,
yeah,
you think that the entire Arab world is one giant blob of people that all think the same.
yeah,
And which is why your channel is so important, I think, also, and discussions like what we have here with
yes,
you. And what I find interesting is, like, for example, you mentioned Hamas taking, literally murdering people in the streets right now, not too far
yeah,
from where I am, by the way, which is
yeah,
crazy. And the protests that were happening all throughout America and Europe for 2 years already, of people saying that that Israel is killing Gazans, genocide, whatever. Right now, no one is protesting for these poor Gazans that are being shot in the streets. And the
yep,
media itself in the West is not talking about it almost. How
yeah.
do you why do you think? I guess two questions. Why do you think the protests have stopped? That's not a media question. It's
Mhm.
more of like, how do you look at this, and the difference between the Arab world, like you said, that is coming more towards a peaceful way of thinking, and people in the West that are moving towards a less peaceful way of thinking, and
Yep.
also why isn't the media talking about it?
Wow, really, actually this we've been talking about this today because it's really it gets like your attention. Like, wow, it's really not about human lives. It's really not about anybody here. You're talking about an ideology that is anti-Israel, anti-West. Fundamentally, it's anti-West, that is just willing to justify its self-hating promotion by using, in this case, the Palestinians, in another case, something else. It's basically using things and issues, twisting them to justify an ideology that wants to destroy the West. And I'm saying this very seriously, and I do not take this lightly at all. I grew up under a dictatorship regime. I know what happens when people are indoctrinated, when people are brainwashed. It is very ugly. And what happens is that people become radical, and specifically when you have a channel like Al Jazeera, who has successfully indoctrinated and radicalized millions of younger generations across the Middle East, North Africa, and in Muslim countries, and is now doing the exact same thing in the West. So we have the media, 100%. You mentioned the media, and this is one of the main issues that I believe we have to be talking about, the media and social media, which are very interconnected right now because like TV is really on its way out, you know, and social media is the strongest and most unfortunately utilized weapon in the hands of these either adversaries who wants to destroy and dismantle the West, or I mean, they're adversaries either you know terrorist organizations or actual countries, right, that want to destroy the West, and they're utilizing social media to do that. So we have, this complete disconnect between those people who are protesting, claiming to protest for the Palestinians, who become very silent when the Palestinians are being killed and executed with a point blank shot in the back of the head by Hamas. I'm sorry, you just, that's it. You lost any credibility. You lost any credibility right now, because what really matters to you is about attacking Israel and attacking the West. It is not about the Palestinians. You are hammering down and literally supporting those evil forces that have destroyed the lives of tens of millions of people, if not hundreds of millions of people across the Middle East, North Africa. And I think this is one of the clearest examples now, because they do not care about what's happening to the people in Gaza right now.
How do you explain also the fact that, I mean, I heard not too long ago a video I saw of the UAE's, I don't know if he's the current or the former foreign
Mhm.
minister, who said, you know, when we have Muslim Brotherhood in our countries, we just put them, we know how to take care of them because we
Mhm.
know how dangerous they are for our societies, for our stability,
Yes.
and for our thriving and success. And you guys in the West, they control everything that's Muslim and Arab. They control all their organizations, and you bring them in. You invite them in. So just maybe, and in the media, obviously, I think when you see in mainstream media in the U.S. and especially in Europe, but also in the U.S., they want an expert on the situation. A lot of times, if not most, they'll invite someone who's biased towards the Muslim Brotherhood position or the Islamic or the Iranian government's position, but definitely not someone who's on the more peaceful side of things when they want the Arab sort of point of view. So can you just talk about that?
So I think that the issue here that, first of all, these radical elements, with the help of countries that are willing to put a lot of money, like Qatar, have been successful, unfortunately, in infiltrating the American, let's say, academia, media, because, and all of these organizations, the nonprofit organizations world, because they are exploiting the freedoms and the liberties that the West offers. They're basically using it against the West itself. The same freedoms that they do not give to the people in these countries in across, in the Middle East, in Arab speaking countries. Now, this is what's happening, unfortunately. On the other side, the people who lived through this in the Arabic speaking countries have already lived under their evil. They know more than anybody what it means to live under or have a terrorist organization that is literally roaming around and could violate anybody's human rights in any moment, with no accountability, with no rule of law, with no freedom of speech. You as a human being have no value. Your life has no value. And people who live through this know more than anybody how dangerous and how bad and how destructive these forces are. It's literally, for me, Ariel, I look at people like here, I'm like, do you realize the privileges and the amazing rights and opportunities and all these things that you have because you're blessed to be born in a Western country, in a democratic country. You know, people who live through what I live through, we appreciate this a lot more. Of course, with the exception of the people who lived through this, but they're ideological, they're Islamists, they are already extremists, that they ran away just to, kind of abuse the rights and the opportunities that they have here in the West to use it against the West. But I want to tell you, a lot of the people who are here, the Islamists who are protesting with those protesters, who are also unfortunately have been brainwashed by social media, through academia, they never lived in the Middle East. A lot of the people who actually come from the Middle East more recently, they are against the people here who've been born here. They're probably Muslim, but they were radicalized like other people, and they are holding on to these same ideologies that Qatar, like through Al Jazeera, is trying to spread, for example. And but they're really disconnected from the realities there. That's why you see the shift of here. More people are being just completely used by these elements, and people over there are being like, no, you're really this is very dangerous what you're doing.
And I would just add to that that all of these protesters, whether they're Islamists or progressive wokesters or whatever you want, or students at these universities, they all, the one thing they have in common, and they don't have a lot, but the one thing they have in common is that they hate the West. It's not just Israel. They hate the countries they live in. You won't see an American flag in a pro-Palestinian protest in the U.S. You won't see a British flag in the U.K. and et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have to put that into context, that a lot of this hatred towards Israel is
Yes.
just because these people hate everything on the West, and Israel is at the moment at the forefront of that. But if Israel wouldn't be there, they would be protesting their own countries. So
Hmm.
I think that's something we should just keep in mind when we talk about it. Now I
Hmm.
want to talk about Yalla,
Yes.
because, well, Yalla has become a word in Hebrew too, by the way.
Yes,
But
let's go, right?
it's like, yeah, let's go. Great, let's go.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about, just, we spoke about Al Jazeera and its ilk and the way it's poisoning the minds of whoever watches it.
Yep.
What is, are you able to counter that? How many people, like, what are you guys doing?
So let me tell you about Yalla. Yalla is a soft form content that aims to inspire younger generations and across the Middle East, North Africa, through positive, just kind of builders stories of builders. That's why builders of the Middle East, who are our partners, like, are just ideal partners for us, because we both have this kind of approach, is like telling these positive stories, inspiring younger generations to do good, showcase and platform voices of peace, of coexistence, countering extremist narratives, but through soft content that's catered for younger generations on social media, both in Arabic and in English. Yalla basically targets the Arabic speaking audience, but everything we do, we also translate in English. And we've been able to make a dent. We have people, like, we have hundreds of thousands of views for every video we create. We have millions of people watching us across. We've been able to make a dent on social media. Of course, we are a smaller organization. We are not nearly, to what, like, a channel like Al Jazeera has in terms of budget. They have massive, massive budgets. And I think that's where the issue is, because what we're trying to do is basically not talk to the people that already agree with us. We're reaching the silent majority. We're reaching the people who are either on the sidelines, or the people who've probably been lied to, who don't have ideological affiliation with the other side that is trying to brainwash people to think that Hamas is a good guy, okay? But they are actually just not informed. They're ill-informed. They've been influenced by TikTokers who, wanting to be trendy, or are paid by these elements that want to, infiltrate the minds and hearts of younger generations. But they really don't know. They really are just being used. So those are the people we want to talk to. Those are the people we're targeting, and it's really important that we also do the same in terms of news, and that's what Middle East
Yeah.
24. But
Wait,
let's finish
that's the
about
next thing.
that. Yes,
And that's how I got to you, is
yes.
this new project called Middle East, or ME24. You guys, by the way, everyone should look you guys up. You do very interesting X spaces once in a while,
Yes.
on a regular basis, even I think maybe on a weekly basis or so, where you bring people from all over the Middle East to talk about what's happening in a very rational and not crazy way. And you're able to, well, it's true, it happens a lot that you just get the crazies talking and screaming at each other. So you get people who know what they're talking about. But what is the vision, and where do you think you're going with this?
So, Yalla, like I said, is targeting younger generations, soft content, storytelling, really important things, because a lot of younger generations are not really watching because they want to, like, watch the news, right? There's a lot of those people who are just there because they're interested in just scrolling and watching something interesting that comes up to you. And that's really important, because all of this aspect of the Middle East has not been told, right? And we want to inspire, we want to give platforms to silence voices who are usually were marginalized traditionally in the Arabic speaking world, voices that want to build, that want to create coexistence. Now, Middle East 24, and thank you for asking me about that, is basically, our vision is that we want to become the counter voice to Al Jazeera when it comes to stories and news coming out of the Middle East. And this is a very, very important mission, because a lot of people are actually looking to consume news about the Middle East. The issue here is that they're getting it from sources that are literally spreading lies and false propaganda. I actually had a couple of videos that we already started. It's a series called Al Jazeera Uncovered on Middle East 24. When we expose Al Jazeera, it's really important that we let people know that what they're getting is a terrorist, literally a terrorist organization funding and promoting channel. It's not a journalistic platform. So it is time that we bring out the truths from the Middle East. We bring the voices that are unheard coming out of the Middle East, that we literally share with the people who are interested in learning about this very rich and ancient and interesting region, to know about its complexities, about its realities, and through an honest, unbiased, deep analysis, platforming voices that are coming right from the region into the English speaking audience. So, this is our mission. And yes, we want to go completely countering this very destructive effort that we've been witnessing, unfortunately, unveiling itself in the West.
Shalom, Israeli friends. I'm Nikos from the Ayn Rand Institute. For 2 years now, you have been told that your grief doesn't matter, that your struggle to survive is a quote genocide, and you've been told that you must sacrifice yourselves for those who wish to destroy you. So it's time we asked, what kind of ideas produce such poisonous views? What motivates those who stand with your wannabe destroyers? And I know something about all this, Because for decades, I used to believe those same anti Israel myths. But some years ago, I decided to focus on the truth instead. And since then, I've been committed to fighting by your side. On December 19th, join me and a group of speakers who will make the case for Israel's right to exist more forcefully than you've ever heard before. Click the link to register. Remember, soldiers and students attend for free. See you in Tel Aviv.
I wish you success in that. The world would be a better place if you guys succeed. The last question is more of a, I don't know, like interesting but not life-threatening question. You've interviewed lots of interesting people. You've spoken over the years. It's your life. Would you, number one, who was the most interesting that you spoke slash interviewed, and who do you want to interview that you haven't been able to interview yet?
Oh my God, Ariel, that's a hard question.
I try.
um, I had a lot of heart-touching interviews, very difficult ones. I've had very emotional ones. I interviewed families from the Israeli hostages. Their families were already basically abducted by Hamas, and they were basically suffering through the situation. One of the most difficult ones was with the Bibas's family's
Yeah,
cousin. So those were very emotional, but I think very important because in the Arabic speaking world, and again, Yalla is basically targeting Arabic speaking audience, but also Western audience who are interested to know about these untold stories because nobody was ever talking about what happened on October 7th and nobody talked about the stories of these families and what happened to them. And that was a really, I think, a very powerful, very painful, and very transformative, I believe, for me, especially as a mom,
hmm,
to basically understand and go deep into this. And I think that a lot of people who watched it were like, really? We didn't know this happened. This is really hard. Like, this is really painful. We had no idea. And I think that's really important to share because it's been like completely hidden from the Arabic
yeah,
speaking audience. Um, there's a lot of really interesting interviews that I've done, very good ones. You know, I think that just like when we have stories where we challenge this propaganda, I think to me that's the most fulfilling work I can do is basically truth telling and sharing stories and sharing just perspectives that are usually silenced is very, very important. And
yeah,
I call it a life mission for myself. There's literally countless examples. And we did the same in ME24 because we've been giving these a lot of these voices and people who are literally not reaching
yeah.
not traditional media, not international media, Arabic or English speaking media, a platform to voice their opinions. I'm gonna leave the one about who I would like to interview open because in
You
my
never know.
yeah, like I want to leave it open. I do have people in mind, but I'm not gonna because it's it just becomes a little bit if it's okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's okay. I just want to say, Avi, before I let you go, is that what you're doing is so important that I'm sure you get tons of threats because you're in a world where there are a lot of people that would love for people like you to just go away. We spoke about how a lot of these countries work and these terrorist organizations that you explained how dangerous they are, and a lot of people know because they went through it, like you. So these people probably don't like you. So I
yeah.
would just wish you to be safe and continue doing all that you're doing. It was a very important conversation. I enjoyed it. And hopefully, we'll also publish this in the newspaper here. So, double exposure. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ariel. I'm so happy to finally join you, and I look forward to having future conversations together.
God willing, for sure. Come to Israel. We'll meet in person.
Absolutely.
Bye bye, Havi.
Bye.